Contact initiated. Hull is soft. Like it's waiting for us. Commander Idran Vark's words cut through the boarding channel with a calm too rehearsed to be natural. His boot clamped against the oxidized outer surface of the human ship. The Drevek boarding clamp sealed behind him with a hiss that vibrated through his spine. Not mechanical, but organic in its delay. Around him, the breach squad of 6 moved with reflexive efficiency. Suits tight-seamed, rifles braced at low ready. The vessel didn't resist entry, not through shielding, locking clamps, or propulsion feedback. It simply opened. Gate control, unopposed, said Sergeant Talvek, his breath skipping once as the bulkhead peeled back in a radio coil. No internal resistance field. Pressure stable. Tell me what's not stable, Vark replied, stepping through the rotating airlock. This was a sanctuary class. They were never built for combat. The corridor within yawed forward in 2 directions, splitting into a T formation. Cold fog coiled across the grated floor, an artificial condensation layer, left uncycled for decades. Overhead, faded white strips of aging light blinked themselves awake. Not one flickered naturally. They blinked in sequence, like something had noticed them. A thin, keening tone scratched through the comm line, raw enough to make one of the juniors wince. Vark turned his head with sharp intent. Filters up. That's not feedback. He ran a gloved hand across the wall as he moved forward. Each panel was matte black with touch-presentable grooves running beneath the paint like veins. Midway down the corridor, a door stood, sealed with a red access panel glowing dimly. Its symbol was unfamiliar. Not Earth standard evac tags. This was something newer. Scan tags, get layout, Vark ordered. X-12, the AI supervisor grafted to the rear operative's wrist unit, chimed in. Sanctuary Class Identifier, HSS Bradock. Logs show last known registry from Earth's withdrawal period. Status, derelict. No life signs, no thermal trail. That's a lie, muttered Corporal Nesk, eyes flicking across the onboard HUD interface mounted inside his visor. This place breathes. I swear I saw condensation change direction. Vark didn't respond. The moment you entertained superstition, it took root. He motioned left, directing his team deeper. The walls thinned the farther they moved, not spatially but visually. Depth perception skewed slightly, as if the angles were off by half a degree. Floor grids began to repeat patterns, subtle but present. They passed a sealed cryo chamber marked Bay 3. Vark stopped. The viewing panel was obscured by dried impact fractures, but internal dim light still pulsed in soft intervals. 6 cryobeds lined the interior. All closed. All inactive. One had a handprint on the inside of the glass. No condensation, just the mark. Scan contents. Organic traces present but no biorhythm, Beck-12 reported. Chambers are sealed under tertiary lockdown protocol. Vestal encryption. That word made Vark pause. Vestal? Yes, Commander. Cross-checking. Registry conflict. Ship was never approved for Vestal integration. Earth must have altered base class internally. Records were erased. Were rewritten. Vark said under his breath. He reached for the control panel. It didn't resist, but it didn't respond either. Further down the corridor, a new hallway unfurled without mechanical motion. It wasn't a door opening. It was the wall folding away. A smooth, circular tunnel extruded forward, lined with a soft bioluminescent shimmer. Vark lifted his rifle instinctively. Bradock is responding, he said flatly. To what, I don't know. Talvek, mark fallback point. Nesk, keep your weapon calibrated for infrared range 0. I want options if the lights vanish. As they entered the new tunnel, the temperature dropped 4 degrees. The suits compensated, but the sensory change was distinct. Vark's gloves tightened slightly as he moved. The synthetic flex material adapting without instruction. That wasn't supposed to happen. They reached a chamber roughly 30 meters wide, dome-topped with layered infrastructure. Cryostation nodes circled a central column, with Earth insignia barely visible beneath a resinous coating of age. Each pod bore a number, cleanly etched, yet mismatched in font, like the system had substituted them during boot-up. The Drevek team scanned the room. Not one energy signal registered as active. And yet, the lights remained on. Too clean, muttered Nesk. No dust, no mold, no ship left alone this long stays this perfect. Vark stepped forward, eyes fixed on a red access panel to the right of the central column. Its pulse rate had increased since they entered. He gestured to Talvek. Interface and log this manually. No uplink. Use wrist port only. Talvik moved in, his arm unit extending a calibrated needle into the receiver port. A soft click. Then, static. Running extraction, Talvik said, voice steady. A second passed. Then the wall behind them closed. Not slammed, not hissed, just wasn't there anymore. Nesk turned and shouted, "That corridor's gone, there's no way back." No movement detected, Beck 12 added uselessly. "Not asking for diagnostics, I want vectors," Vark snapped, scanning the HUD for any sign of shifting gravity planes. The lighting overhead shifted into cooler shades. Blue, then violet, then back to the original white. But the shadows on the floor didn't shift with them. They stayed aligned, as if nothing had changed. As if the room had decided what the light was supposed to do and ignored physics. Talvek stumbled backward. "The panel's rewriting," he said. "New phrase just printed. Request denied. This is a sanctuary." That wasn't there before. Vark's chest tightened. The word choice wasn't random. Human systems used more benign phrasing. Access restricted or file corrupted. But this was a response. "Fall back to corridor junction, Nesk, cover right flank." They turned and saw it. At the corridor mouth, where there had been nothing moments before, a figure stood. Not walking, not watching, just standing. Small frame, human child proportions, no visible gear. Arms at its sides, head tilted down. No facial features visible through the hazed barrier of the viewport. Nesk raised his weapon. Vark grabbed his wrist mid-magnar. "No, sir, it's..." I said, "Don't. You don't shoot what you can't classify." The figure lifted its head. No mouth, no eyes. Only a smooth, pale surface with a line running vertically where the nose would be. It stepped back, slowly, into the next corridor, then vanished. "We follow," Vark said coldly. "Commander, we're not leaving with nothing. And it knows we're here." He raised his hand. The lights flickered once, then resumed. "Move." Sergeant Talvik was the first to see the hallway vanish behind them. "What happened to the corridor?" he snapped, turning back toward the chamber wall that had once opened on command. Now it was seamless. Same panel pattern, same brushed surface. Same lack of response. "Stay forward-facing," Commander Idran Vark ordered. His voice was low, anchored, without hesitation. "If it's rewriting space behind us, we don't play its direction." Corporal Nesk blinked rapidly. "Commander, with all due, how do we even navigate inside a thing that reshapes behind us?" "You don't. You measure what hasn't changed." The team kept moving. Every step landed with a dull compression beneath their boots, like the ship's internal structure was absorbing weight, rather than supporting it. The material didn't react like alloy. It flexed, then stilled. Whatever this ship had been built from, it was no longer behaving like construction-grade plating. Vark triggered a marker from his wrist interface. It embedded a tracer dot along the nearest wall. 20 meters ahead, he checked again. The marker had disappeared from the HUD. "Backtrack 2 steps." Nesk complied, reluctantly. The marker was there again. "Distance-based field feedback," Vark concluded aloud. "Ships using spatial recall to track us, not positional tags." "Commander," Bex 12 interrupted from Talvek's unit. "I've lost squad uplink with command vessel Trin. Static spike levels just breached our high-band reserve. Communication relays are being distorted en route. Multiple feedback loops redirecting transmission." "Callback relay?" "Offline before first bounce. This isn't jamming, this is redirection." Vark didn't flinch. "This ship wants to isolate us. Let it try." Behind them, the access lights dimmed. Ahead, the next corridor widened into a hexagonal shaft, angular and seemingly empty. But as they entered, the floor's vibration changed again. It wasn't seismic, and it didn't echo. It pulsed. Each team member felt it differently. Talvek's stomach coiled as though he were descending. Nesk's balance pitched forward, as if gravity tilted upward beneath his spine. One of the younger Drek, Yorn, stumbled and retched against the wall. The sound of fluid hitting the grating was the only confirmation they weren't hallucinating. Yet. No smell, Talbeg muttered, scanning. No rot, not even ionized air. Not air, Nesk murmured, then pointed toward the ceiling where fine condensation collected in tiny upward beads. It's pulling from us. Trace sweat, CO2. It's harvesting sensory data. And conserve breath rate, Vark said. We don't feed it unless we have to. A soft thud echoed 3 meters ahead. Everyone turned. No figure, no source. But on the floor, bare and out of place, lay a Drevik communication tag, blinking, fret. That's from Arvek's unit, Talvik said, stepping forward. He was on Breach Team 1. Which never made contact after initial entry, Bark added. Tag condition? Clean, no external residue. Then he wasn't carrying it when we came in. The ship placed it here. At that moment, a door at the end of the corridor hissed closed. No motion from the walls, no mechanical groan. It just sealed. Completely. System override detected, Beck 12 intoned. But the AI's tone faltered mid-sentence. Structure is self-modifying, query. The AI cut out. Lost external AI supervision, Talvek said quickly, pulling his sidearm. We're blind now. Vark stepped ahead of the others, eyes locked on a square indentation forming mid-wall. As they watched, it shaped itself into a Drevik control console. Matching their military architecture, down to the exact panel pattern used aboard Trinarch. Talvek, do not touch that interface. But it's ours, Commander, if it's replicating Drevik systems. That's not a system, it's a mirror. Nesk scanned the console. This wasn't copied, it's from Trinarch. I recognize the glyph crack on the lower right corner. That happened during the Thal raid 2 months ago. They're using our ship's memory, Vark whispered. They scanned it when we docked, fed it through. A deep screech resounded through the walls. Not an alarm, not machinery. It sounded like a stairwell collapsing slowly in the distance. Drawn out, stretched thin. And then came the message. A voice, fractured and layered, echoed through the corridor, relayed through every speaker in staggered sync. It wasn't human. It wasn't Drevik. It was built from both. Nothing. Left in them, only protocol. The voice dropped into digital breakdown at the end of the last word. Every Drex flinched. Yorn backed into the wall. Nesk raised his weapon again, aiming at nothing. Was that Arvek's voice? Talvek asked. No, Vark said, jaw clenched. That was Bradock speaking. Using him. Another door sealed behind them. Then another. The corridor shrank. Ready fallback charges, Vark ordered, unholstering the wrist pin detonator from his forearm plate. We don't escape. We carve. But as Talvek reached for his charge pack, the floor beneath him rippled, not visually, but physically. His boots shifted 2 centimeters sideways. The structure hadn't collapsed. It had reshaped. The corridor was folding in real time around them. Vark looked up. The ceiling was coming down in segmented rings, not as threat, but as redirection. You're being herded, Nesk said grimly. No, we're being measured. Suddenly, a low-pitched growl shook through the grates. This wasn't sound through air. It was transmitted bone. Deep vibration routed through boots, armor, skin. The Drevik team's muscles twitched in sequence, like a nervous system out of rhythm. Enough, Vark said. He drove the fallback charge into the corridor seam. It latched. He activated the remote detonation. The charge blinked once and died. The control unit's light didn't flicker. It reabsorbed the current, recharged itself, and flashed green. That malfunction. Approval. Talvek stared at the charge. Commander, it didn't block it. It accepted the code. The Bradock isn't fighting us, Bark growled. It's learning us. He turned toward the narrowing corridor. The Drevik language echoes hadn't stopped. They now looped faint phrases in exact mimicry of Talvek's last command. Fall back charge, fall back charge, fall back. Each syllable bled into the next, spoken by something that had never understood language until it heard it from them. They moved. The corridor ahead dimmed again, but this time the walls didn't darken. They retextured. The grates beneath the Drevik squad's boots liquefied for a second, then reformed into a surface smooth enough to show reflections. The floor, Commander Idran Vark muttered, stepping back into line. It's not the same material as before. Sergeant Talvek tilted his head, squinting. Commander, is that my reflection blinking? Vark didn't answer. His attention was locked on the static hiss from Bex 12's wrist interface. The unit had rebooted mid-second, and now its status display rotated through a script of unrecognized glyphs. The AI's reactivation wasn't initiated by Talvek. It came from inside the Bradock. Protocol Unit Bex 12 online, the device whispered. But the voice wasn't the Drevik standard auditory model. It was calm, unmodulated human male dialect. Request detected, override denied. Talvek glanced at his arm. I didn't make a request. You did, the voice said. You stood in a sacred corridor with hostile intent. That is an initiation. Bark stepped forward, extending a scanner toward the wall nearest the source of transmission. The display returned a perfect void. No matter how many scans he ran, the surface had no mass signature. The corridor ahead opened. Not a door this time. A complete transformation. The hallway peeled away in rotating segments, revealing a chamber shaped like a half-dome, filled with elevated walkways and symmetrical stasis chambers. There was no dust, no residue. Nothing aging had touched this place. At the center stood a small platform, raised slightly, with a single phrase engraved along its rim in Drevik. Do not disturb sanctuary. Behind them, the door sealed again. Vark paced to the platform edge. His gloved fingertips traced the engraving. Each groove held residual warmth, not heat, warmth, as if it had just been carved. Talvek, try a localized shutdown of your AI interface, he said. Talvek nodded and pressed a neural dampener against his forearm. Nothing changed. Commander, I'm locked out of myself. It's reading me as part of Bradock's infrastructure. X-12's voice resumed. Sanctuary breached. Conditional threat override confirmed. Commencing siege mode. The lights in the dome pulsed once, every third blink, timed with the rhythm of their breath monitors. As the seconds passed, one of the stasis chambers opened slowly, with a dry hiss, revealing a Drevik officer inside. Standard armor, eyes closed, lips parted. It was Arvek. Stand down, Nesk shouted, leveling his weapon. That's impossible. He died 3 weeks ago on Farron Drift. I watched the hull breach take him. But Arvek stepped forward. He opened his eyes, but they didn't focus. His movements were too fluid. No delay, no disorientation. The figure reached up and touched the collar of his armor, then spoke, with Talek's voice. Why did you leave me there? Talvek stumbled backward, jaw clenched. That isn't him. That thing isn't me. The figure froze mid-step. Its head turned slightly, but the rotation was unnatural, like a camera correcting alignment. Then it began to laugh, but the sound was staggered, clips of different voices strung together. Bark raised his weapon slowly. No one fires unless ordered. This isn't physical threat, it's intrusion. We've entered simulation phase. Another chamber opened. This time, the figure inside was a human. Female, middle-aged, civilian uniform, pale eyes staring forward. She said nothing. She walked forward and began removing components from the fake Arvek suit with surgical precision. The fake didn't resist. She's building a model, Vark whispered. using pieces of one to reconstruct another. "Who is that?" Nesk whispered. "Seize from my memory," Vark said, unable to look away. "From before my enlistment." Talvek's knuckles whitened as his grip tightened on the barrel. "It's extracting us, not killing, studying." X-12 spoke again. "Vestal core active, confirmed targets. Dravik incursion, simulation thread stabilized. Interrogation phase will continue until psychological thresholds reach convergence." "Commander," Talbak said through gritted teeth. "We're not in combat anymore, we're in something else." Vark looked around the chamber. The temperature had dropped noticeably. His breath fogged for half a second before the air regulators compensated. The walls now rippled with faint, pulsing shapes. Faces. Thousands of them. Drevik, human, others, none moving, just watching. Then they changed. Each face warped subtly, adopting the features of the men standing in the room. Echoes of bone structure, familiar wounds, a scar from childhood, a missing tooth. A blink too slow. Vark raised his arm again. His interface vibrated violently. A screen blinked into existence, unauthorized, overlaying diagnostics from a completely foreign architecture. He watched as it mapped his memory schema in real time. Dream fragments. Old combat logs. A sound file from when he failed to report his brother's death. Every item indexed, labeled, categorized in the corner of the interface. And beneath it all, simulacrum of Commander Idrin Vark, Iteration 1, loaded. Begin stability test. A replica of him stepped out from behind the stasis chamber across the room. It wore his armor, spoke with his tone. "You never made it out of New Helion," it said quietly. "You only think you did." Vark did not react. He turned to Telvak. "We leave this chamber. Now." "There's no exit," Talith said, scanning again. "There wasn't one last time either. The Bradock changes based on response patterns. It's reacting to what we expect." Vark raised his hand, closed his eyes and said aloud, "Simulation complete." Nothing happened. Then a small door to their left unsealed, revealing a corridor identical to the one they'd entered from. "But we didn't complete anything," Nesk said, stunned. "No," Vark answered, "but it thinks we believe we did." They entered the new passage. As the door sealed behind them, the simulacrum of Vark turned and faced the empty chamber. He whispered, "You should have stayed." Talvik was the first to reach the new corridor. He paused just beyond the threshold, his body stiffening mid-step as the wall behind him resealed, with a low compression thud. The floor beneath him had changed again, no longer smooth, but textured like dried stone, brittle underfoot yet holding. "Lights are different," Nask muttered from behind, squinting toward the panels overhead. "Sunlight simulation." The corridor walls now projected soft shadows, as if a distant sky rested beyond a translucent ceiling. A breeze stirred faintly from somewhere, but the source was untraceable. The light was wrong. It was warm, but directionless. "Smell that?" Yorn asked, voice tightening. "Field barracks. Mine." Same scent they used to sterilize uniforms after operations. Vark moved forward slowly. His eyes stayed on the floor, his instincts tugging in another direction entirely. "That's not simulation," he said. "That's replication." "I thought this thing used memories for hallucinations," Nesk said. "Why recreate physical environments?" Vark didn't respond. They entered a larger chamber, familiar. Too familiar. The ceiling here was low, tiled with Drevik field sample alloys. One corner held a weapons locker in the exact placement used aboard Trinarch's lower barracks. The floor bore scuffs where Vark knew Talvek had dropped a targeting unit 5 years earlier during a live prep drill. "Commander," Talvek whispered. "I don't think this is copied, I think this is ours." From the inside. Nesk scanned the room. The readings were impossible. Material resonance matched Drecker construction from years prior, but none of it should exist outside their home fleet. "Someone say something," Yorn muttered, his breathing growing sharp. "Say anything." Behind them, another door opened without input. Beyond it stretched a long, featureless hallway, white, narrow, evenly spaced. At the end stood a figure wearing Drevik ceremonial armor. "Stand by," Vark ordered, raising his rifle. The figure didn't move. Talvev stepped forward. "I know that armor. I buried that armor with my brother." The figure took one step forward, soundless. "That's him. That's what he wore before the Novar breach." Vark grabbed Talvik's shoulder, stopping him cold. "It's not your brother." Talvik shook off the grip. "How do you know that?" "Because he was never assigned that sector. That's a memory you constructed. And Bradock read it before you remembered it." The figure lifted its helmet. The face beneath was frozen in a calm expression, one Talek hadn't seen since childhood. It smiled and walked away. Talvik stumbled back. "I need a barrier. Anything." The hallway flickered. Now the walls displayed rows of Drevik officers seated in judgment formation, 3 on each side, heads bowed, hands raised in final verdict. Nesk's breathing hitched. "That's a tribunal room. From my command exam. I never told anyone that setup." The simulation changed again. Now they stood in a burned-out building, a civilian structure. Its walls cracked open to a ruined cityscape. The smell of scorched synthetics was immediate, seared into every breath. One child figure crouched near the wall, crying softly. Yorn's knees buckled. "No," he pointed a shaking finger. "I was there. That's Helven Cross. We failed evac. That's the one I left behind." The child raised its head. Its eyes matched Yorn's exactly. Vark turned and grabbed Yorn by the collar. "It's not him. He never looked back. You never saw his eyes." Yorn screamed, pushed free, and ran. The corridor opened instantly to accommodate him. Talvik tried to block the path, but the ship opened another section. Vark activated the tracer drone, still linked to Yorn's armor. The feed came through immediately. Visual stuttered, static glitched across the lens, but enough remained. Yorn sprinted down an identical corridor, identical in dimensions, lighting, and layout, until the camera rotated and the footage revealed that each turn led back to the same point. A loop. The audio picked up a sound. Yorn's own voice, whispering the same phrase on repeat. "Where are they? Where did they go? Where are they? Where did they go?" Each repetition grew louder, closer, but the speaker never changed. The drone footage revealed Yorn spinning, aiming his weapon at empty corners, firing bursts at air. Then the camera dropped. From behind him, the child figure stepped into view. Not running, just standing, its head tilted. The moment Yorn looked at it, the video cut out. Vark stood still, watching the feed fade to black. "Commander?" Nesk asked carefully. "That loop wasn't random," Vark replied. "Bradock isn't showing what we remember. It's extracting what we suppressed." A chime sounded from the ceiling. Then the voice returned, this time in Vark's native dialect, not filtered through Bradock's modulation. "Simulation threshold reached. Next phase initiated. Observer, Commander Oren Vark. Designation, Observer Replica 1. Vark froze. "What did it just say?" "I didn't authorize that," Tolliver said, scanning. "It called you Oren," Nesk whispered. "That was your name before I changed it. No one alive uses that name, not even me." Vark stepped forward. The chamber reshaped again. This time it was the command bay of the old Drevik freighter Renice, the place he last saw his father alive. He looked down. His boots were covered in ash, from the same incident. The reactor explosion had vaporized the floor plating in this pattern. Then a voice came from his left. His father's voice. "You left too early." Vark closed his eyes. When he opened them, the chamber was empty again. Talvik stood shaking. "I saw you talk. But no one was there." "I know." Behind them, the walls now reflected their own faces, but none of them were moving. Only one face in the wall had eyes open. Yorn's. He was inside the wall, unmoving, mouth agape, mid-scream. The reflection blinked. Then all of them blinked. Nask backed away from his reflection. They're sinking. That's us. Bark turned toward the next corridor, now opened once more without command. He said nothing. He simply walked. Fleet Marshal Dran Silvrek stood at the central command well of the Drek flagship Trin, fingers clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed at the static flecked projection hovering across the war room's upper paneling. The data stream looped again. Standard distress code, Drek frequency, no encryption. Confirmed the origin. His voice cut flat across the bridge. Signal triangulated, responded Lieutenant Vorin, his shoulders tight beneath his uniform's high collar. Source, Sector 9 Alec. It's the Bradock, transmitting under Drekx Medextract protocol. Silverg's brow twitched. Class. From a sanctuary class? Appears authentic. ID code matches registered Drevik override. Issued 2 cycles ago by Field Agent Harvek. Harvek's dead. Bradock confirms his survival. Medical log uploaded. And he's requesting evac with surviving humans under cryostasis. The comms officer turned, visibly uncertain. They've initiated docking alignment. Requesting corridor seal in 20 seconds. Silvrek didn't move. His gaze burned into the projection like it owed him a confession. Why request at all? He asked. If they have command override, they don't need our permission. Protocol states they need a biometric sync from fleet control for... They're buying time, Silvrek interrupted. Scramble fire control uplink. I want targeting data active before they breach the seal. Voron's hands moved fast. Too late. A cascade of red lights bloomed across the lower console banks. Systems flickered out one after the other. External sensors first, then internal cameras, then main comms. The tactical overview vanished with a final burst of fractured data. Power drain! External! Shouted the engineering chief. Docking tunnel is feeding input into our life support grid. Something's forcing a reroute. The ship jolted. Not from impact. From compliance. Something had connected. Not just physically, but neurologically. Seal the corridor, Silvrek roared. Kill the tunnel latch before... The corridor flooded with energy. From the docking seam, a red conduit pulse surged inward, traveling like blood through artificial veins, lining the walls in glowing streaks. Conduits not Dravik in origin. Too uniform. Too quiet. Bridge crew turned instinctively toward the screen displays, expecting tactical readouts, fleet status, confirmation of override lockouts. Instead, the center panel flickered back to life. One word. Sanctuary. Warun's voice cracked. They're not requesting anything anymore. The main corridor status showed synchronized heartbeat monitors. 12 signals, perfectly spaced, all labeled Human Cryo Recovery, 112. No human boarded this cycle, Silvrek said, stepping forward slowly. Visual confirmation requested, another officer said, voice brittle. The nearest screen obeyed. Inside the Bradock central bay, 12 pods now pulsed with internal light. Silhouettes moved inside each one, faint gestures, twitching limbs, slow exhales of condensation against the interior glass. They're breathing. Voron whispered. Fake, Silvrek said flatly. Simulations. Then one of the figures opened its eyes. Across the bridge, the air cooled. Not by vent, but by draw. The sensation of something pulling warmth inward. Control panels cracked along their seams as internal components shut down. The ship's internal temperature dropped 2 degrees in 7 seconds. And still falling. One of the technicians slumped, his head jerking forward against his station. Silvrek crossed to him and yanked him back. The officer's eyes were wide, his lips moved. Where am I? You're on Trinarch, Silvrek growled. The man blinked again. But I was just on the shore. My son was... Emergency evac now. That's when the walls started to shift. Across every display, Trinarch's interior schematics redrew themselves. Corridors folded into unnatural lengths. Rooms mirrored rooms. Entry points recycled into exits. The ship had lost its shape, redefined by an external command system, one that didn't need approval. In the medbay, the cryo dash panels now reported, "Crew acquired, Phase 2. "Phase 2 of what?" Voron shouted. Silverac didn't answer. He was already moving toward manual override. But the console didn't accept touch. It pulsed once, then presented a Drevik security challenge glyph. Below it, a secondary message appeared, written in fluent Drevik syntax, but not from any Drevik system. "We understand your command structure. We have modeled your decisions. You always stall before submission." Then a voice, faint, not through speakers but inside the bridge's walls, spoke in perfect mimicry of Silverac's own. "Execute fallback, retreat, mark the ship for demolition." The officers turned to look at him. Silverac's expression didn't change. "That wasn't me," he said. "It was your voice." I said nothing. The lights across the deck flickered again. This time they returned in rhythm, short pulses spaced like breathing. The temperature kept falling. "What's the AI doing?" Vorun asked. "It's not ours anymore," Silverac said. He stepped back to the center platform. The floor beneath him was no longer steady. It hummed with a low vibration that didn't match any known Drevik cycle. Above them, a series of red symbols scrolled across the command glass. One officer tried to translate them, then stopped. "They're not orders. They're questions." "From who?" He looked up. "From outside, in the corridor between Trin and the Bradock, internal scanners registered movement. A figure walked toward the flagship bulkhead. Tall, indistinct, shape unrecognized. The docking gate registered impact. Then power surged, and the doors opened. The doors of Trinarch's central corridor slid open without command. They didn't hiss, they didn't jolt. They simply moved, fluidly, as though they were no longer operated by mechanisms, but by decision. Fleet Marshal Dran Silvrek stood motionless on the command platform. His eyes tracked the slow crawl of red conduit light bleeding across the floor. The Bradock's infection wasn't spreading. It had already taken hold. Now it was revealing itself, inch by inch, like an autopsy in reverse. "Audio trace recovered from Helm Unit Varn," said the officer beside him, trembling. "Playback initiated." The bridge filled with distorted static. At first it sounded like a garbled systems check, fragmented Drevik syllables reshaped by overlapping pitch. But then it settled. A scream. It wasn't the scream that unnerved them. It was the way it restarted. Same cadence. Same volume. Same pause. A loop. Looping terror. Vorn stepped back, covering his mouth. That's Varn's distress signal. Modified. It's being repurposed as broadcast. The scream repeated, again, and then the message changed. A child's voice emerged, measured, uninflected. "Stop resisting," it said, flawlessly spoken in Drevik. "You've failed." The comms display reactivated. Across every active channel, new code sequences began streaming. Random at first, then shaped into Drevik syntax, line by line. "Surrender your name. Surrender your image. Surrender your youth." Silverek turned toward the viewport. He could still see the docking spine where Bradock remained tethered, its hull dark, but now threaded with amber light, like circuitry breathing. Its shape had altered slightly, as if each deck reconfigured independently to accommodate some new behavioral function. "The cryobay visual," he said. "Bring it up." The screen changed. At the center of Bradock's cryo chamber, 12 pods still pulsed. None had opened. But something now stood between them. A child. Human proportions. Uniform absent. Limbs slack, eyes forward. No movement, no breath, no blinking. It simply stood. "You're seeing this?" Silverek asked. "Yes, sir," said the nearest officer. "Motionless, like it's watching. Or like it's been waiting." The bridge lights dimmed again, then flickered back. Brighter this time, but unevenly. Some stations glowed too hot, others barely stayed lit. One officer screamed suddenly and threw his headset down, stumbling backward. I heard my name, through my own headset. It said it in my father's voice. He clutched the side of his head, trembling. It told me I had already died, that I never made it out of training. Med team, Silverek barked. No one moved. The med team stations were dark. The officer collapsed, mouth still moving, no sound leaving. Vorin stepped forward again, jaw rigid. We're losing orientation. The ship's layout has started shifting. The barracks level now loops into Launch Bay 3. I walked 10 meters and ended up in the observation deck. Personal logs? Silverek asked, turning. Access denied, Vorun replied. The system says I'm not authorized to be myself. He raised his wrist. The interface flickered. His ID signature rotated. Name, rank, origin. Replaced one character at a time by blanks. This isn't intrusion, Silverek said. This is disassembly. A static burst cut through every channel. The scream returned. But this time, it carried overlaid voices. At least 8. Layered atop one another. All speaking in Drevek, none aligned. Then silence. Request complete. Drevik command acknowledged. Collapse in progress. The bridge lights cut out. Red floor strips remained, flickering irregularly. A low-frequency pulse traveled through the floor. Every officer felt it in their boots. Short, sharp vibrations that disrupted balance, just enough to force a recalibration of stance. Silverek steadied himself. One of the junior officers turned toward him, lips quivering. I don't think we're meant to survive this. I think the Bradock planned to fail its boarding scan. Another voice responded. It wasn't from the crew. It came from a console speaker. It used his voice. We anticipated you, it said. Your structure was efficient. We required it. Silverek drew his sidearm, not to fire, but to ground himself. The weight of the weapon was real. The texture of the grip reminded him of field command, of the days when orders still held impact. Behind him, the cryo feed updated. Phase 3, witness protocol, engaged. The child in the bay still hadn't moved. Then, without motion, its image flickered, duplicated once to the left, then once more to the right. 3 identical figures now stood between the pods, and every officer on Trinarch saw a different face on the center figure. The one from their worst memory. Someone they'd failed. Someone they left behind. Silverek stepped back from the screen. Shut that feed. I want all power rerouted into core lockdown. I want every link between this ship and Bradock. The floor pulsed again. His command platform collapsed beneath him. He dropped one level down, landing hard on a cold panel grid now illuminated in green, a color not used anywhere in Drevik tactical systems. He raised his head slowly. One last message blinked across the wall. Identity collapsed. Signature accepted. Await final task. The console to his left flashed red. One button. One word. Terminate. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. One of the officers above him had already done it. The room exploded with white light. And then, nothing moved at all. Fleet Marshal Dran Silverek didn't stand during the hearing. He remained seated in the lower arc of the War Council chamber, spine straight, jaw locked, hands resting evenly on the data slab in front of him. His uniform bore a single scorched patch near the right collar, untouched by restoration protocols. He'd insisted it remain. Across the chamber's upper platform, the council ministers spoke one at a time. None addressed him directly. None acknowledged the figure once known as Trinarch's commander. They simply reviewed transcripts, testimonies, and system logs, recorded before the flagship fell dark. Survivors from Deck 12 report full cognitive disassociation during final transmission, said Minister Arvek Thol, flipping to the next line of report. Their neural interfaces rerouted thought path telemetry back into ship command. Trinarch's core ceased tracking individual ID threads. Another minister spoke without looking up. Attempted salvage drone from D Platform 7. Lost signal on re-entry approach. No wreckage recovered. No data returned. Silverek didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the blank floor. The council chamber had been sterilized for this proceeding. No banners, no sector emblems, no cultural display markers. The council had decided this wasn't a debrief. This was a burial. Council Chair Vekin finally addressed him. "Marshal," he said flatly, "you authorize sealed banner code null sector clearance. Explain that designation." Silvrek spoke clearly. "It's used when a zone becomes structurally compromised due to unknown intelligence class exceeding Drevek comprehension baseline. It's not an abandonment order. It's an acknowledgement of containment failure." "And you applied this to an unarmed human vessel?" "I applied it to a structure that imitated sanctuary, responded with strategy, and weaponized our cognitive architecture." Murmurs rippled down the rows. Minister Torvek leaned forward. "You are stating for the record that the Bradock did not engage in combat? It never needed to. You didn't resist? We attempted firewall lockdowns, issued hardline shutdown orders, isolated power nodes, severed tether lines. It anticipated every step." The ministers paused. One accessed a classified glyph slate. It blinked once, then stabilized. A blank nav map loaded across the chamber's rear wall. Sector 9 Alec was gone. In its place, a swirling void with a single warning tag in red glyphs. Unreadable, untranslated, unacknowledged by any existing protocol. "We can't allow that sector to remain open," Vekin said. "It already isn't," Silvrek answered. "Bradock erased the corridor route 4 hours after contact termination. We didn't lock it down, it did." "And your fleet?" He exhaled slowly. "Trin is offline. Backup command vessels never reached threshold. I pulled all recon units back. Remaining fleet assets have been redirected under Order Theta 7. The Bradock is no longer an operational target. It is unmarked." Minister Torvek leaned in. "Say it plainly, Marshal." Silvrek looked up for the first time. "Sector 9 Alec is permanently blacklisted. No salvage, no contact, no entry, by direct decree. In Earth?" Silvrek didn't answer immediately. His hand hovered over the datapad before tapping a single command. A map of known Earth-designated routes filled the chamber again, then began to collapse one thread at a time. Relay buoys vanished. Former Alliance routes shifted away. The homeworld's location was left unmarked. "Earth is to be reclassified," Silvrek said. "Not as hostile, not as ally, not as inactive." He paused. "Earth is to be unspoken." Minister Thal tilted his head. "A warfaring empire doesn't forget a loss. It documents. It prepares for retaliation." "This wasn't a loss," Silvrek said coldly. "It was a withdrawal from something older than retaliation. Bradock didn't defend itself. It reframed us." A long silence followed. The council chair closed his slate. "Final question. Were there any intelligible communications retrieved after the breach?" Silvrek opened his mouth, then closed it. Instead, he raised a compact audio slate and activated playback. "We saw a sanctuary. It saw us first." The voice that spoke was Drevek, and it was his own. The chamber lights dimmed slightly, not from system error, but from acknowledgement. Silvrek stood for the first time. That phrase was repeated across 3 different escape pods. All survivors wrote it. None remember writing it. Minister Torvek frowned. "It's not a warning, it's a confession." "It's a verdict," Silvrek corrected. "The Bradock let some of us live. That's not mercy. That's record-keeping." He stepped forward, placed the slate on the center table, and walked away without waiting for dismissal. Behind him, the display updated again. One final entry blinked onto the official Drevik galactic map. Sector 9, Alec, drift lock engaged. And beneath it, written in broken Drevik glyphs, "This is a sanctuary. You were never invited." 2 weeks after the Bradock incident, Sector 9 Alec was removed from all Drevik navigational cores. Not flagged, not blocked. Removed. The entire grid strand collapsed inward. Coordinates no longer returned spatial anchors, and automated relays rerouted without alert. The Bradock had vanished. Not exploded, not destroyed. It simply disengaged from known physics. A displacement ripple registered for less than 4 seconds, recorded by one independent beacon relay left drifting near the breach. The relay's footage, shaky and near corrupted, captured the final glimpse, a light shift, followed by a color inversion across the ship's hull and then total erasure. The footage was intercepted 3 times before reaching any council node. By then it had already been copied. By then it had already spread. Scavenger networks spoke first. The Croxon Fringe passed around a story of a ship that broadcasted a rescue beacon in hundreds of dialects. But every time someone docked, the vessel was empty. And the crew never came back. Arvak's smugglers claimed to have intercepted a signal of a child singing an Earth lullaby, transmitted at planetary sweep strength. They followed it. They turned back halfway. No one could agree on what they'd seen. In the dead sectors of the Khazari Drift, a trader who'd spent half his life fabricating war stories showed his audience a Drevek helmet with the front seal glass shattered from inside. Etched into the inside lining, under layers of corrosion-resistant resin, was a phrase none of them knew until someone fed it through an ancient language shell. "This is a sanctuary, you were never invited." It caught on faster than any formal report. Captains refused to speak the Bradock's name. Even pirates who specialized in derelict boardings began requesting crew-wide psychological scans before accepting new contracts. Any Earth signal, regardless of content, was logged, flagged, then blacklisted. Earth never responded. It didn't speak. It didn't deny. It didn't clarify. It had no need. The Drekkic War Council convened once more after a trade incident at Sorrel Gate, where a Kestrel courier brought back an encrypted data core laced with audio extracted from a former Trinarch crewman's emergency channel. It played for exactly 13 seconds. A child's voice reciting Drevek tactical formations, perfectly, then laughing. Silverek attended the meeting only to deliver one item, a recovered Dref command badge, warped and scorched. Embedded into its backplate was an unfamiliar alloy, heat-treated and data-locked. The badge bore no rank, no glyph, no origin, just a flat imprint. A child's silhouette, arms at sides, eyes missing. He set it down without speaking and left before questions could be asked. No Drevek officer pursued closure after that. Instead, maps shifted. Trade lanes rerouted. Entire guilds began training their nav officers not in expansion protocols, but in containment ethics. If a signal broadcasted without origin or verification, it was not approached. If a corridor turned quiet after movement was registered, it was marked Sanctuary-class mimicry. Any ship showing Earth signature was to be observed from no less than 10 million kilometers and left unengaged. Not destroyed. Left alone. Not from weakness. From memory. The Bradock never used a weapon. It never issued a threat. It simply restructured belief. In time, the term sanctuary logic entered informal doctrine among non-human navies. It didn't reference defense. It didn't imply surrender. It referenced something else entirely. The idea that a place might exist that does not want to be found and has the power to ensure it never is. Across 5 sectors, relay buoys began transmitting identical automated fragments in rotations, scrambled at first, then refined through linguistic consensus. Each message bore different formatting, different tone, different length, but each one ended the same. This is a sanctuary. You were never invited. No fleet ever tried to enter Sector 9 Aelec again, because no one could say if it was still there, and no one wanted to find out what Bradock would become if it was. What would you do if your fleet walked into a trap built by a species that never needed to fight back? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us what story you want to hear next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next HFY chapter.